So, good morning, everyone. My name is Shanna, and today I wanted to tell you about the research that I'm currently doing, which is about the different ways in-camera visual effects change a director of photography's job. So, I'm going to start with an introduction of myself, then I'll present my research question and tell you why I chose this topic. I'm going to briefly share my data collection method, my data analysis, and then we're going to get to the results. So, hi. My name is Shanna, like I just said, and last year I graduated from the Bachelor of Creative Business, where I first got to learn and work with virtual production. So I have a few years of experience under my belt currently. For my graduation project, I decided to do research in virtual production because I was very passionate. And then when I decided to do the Master Game Technology, to no one's surprise, I decided to do research in virtual production again. So I came up with a research question, which is, in what ways do ICVFX change the work of DOPs when compared to traditional filmmaking approaches? So why did I choose this topic? First of all, a personal interest, which is very important because I have to work on this for a year. I have a love for film, specifically the storytelling and cinematography part, which is why I also chose to focus on DOPs specifically. There is a lack of existing research. ICVFX is a fairly recent topic and rapidly evolving technology. So most information about it can be found in article, blogs, or WhatsApp groups and not necessarily in academic research. So I saw an opportunity and I ran with it. So I had to set up a goal for my research as well, which is to pinpoint challenges, advantages, and changes that working with ICVFX brings for DOPs. And I hope at the end to provide practical information about these findings for anyone in the industry or anyone else that's interested in the topic. So for my data collection method, I had an initial plan, which I thought was fantastic, super confident in it. I wanted to do semi-structured interviews with DOPs that have experience working with ICVFX and traditional filmmaking approaches, and I hoped that the interviews would be around 30 minutes. However, not everything goes according to plan. So the outcome was that I still did semi-structured interviews, but I interviewed 5 DOPs, 2 educators in virtual production, and a digital producer, which means that did broaden the scope of my project, but I did get different perspectives, so yay. And the interviews ranged between 15 to 90 minutes because it turns out that people really love talking about this topic. So my data analysis, I did a thematic analysis, so I found deductive themes, which means that I specifically asked about these topics based on existing literature. So those were the definition of ICVFX, different pipeline, responsibilities, and first-time use. Now, there also were some inductive themes, so I did not ask anything about these themes, but it turned out that almost every participant naturally mentioned it, so I decided to highlight these as well. Limitations and benefits, lighting, appropriateness of virtual production, and language. So to start with the definition of ICVFX, my question for the participants was, in a couple of sentences, how would you describe ICVFX? And at first, I asked this question just to make sure that the participant and I shared a similar understanding, because this term returned in every single question. Turns out, none had the same definition, surprisingly. So for different pipeline, I asked, how do ICVFX change the pipeline of pre-production, production, and post-production? The first thing that was mentioned a lot was more work in pre-production. So the creation and preparation of things as assets, plates, environments, lighting, all need to be done before the start of production. The preparation prior to the project is different, several DOPs mentioned that they ask different questions when they work with ICVFX beforehand, such as how big the LED wall is or what kind of technology they will be working with. And it was mentioned that there is less compositing to do in post, and post-production work is also done on set during production. So the production phases kind of flow into each other. For project responsibilities, the question was, how do ICVFX change your responsibilities compared to your responsibilities during traditional filmmaking? The first thing that came up was collaboration with more key collaborators. So instead of only really collaborating mainly with a director and a producer, DOPs also collaborated with 3D artists and VP and VFX supervisors, so an increased amount. And they mentioned a few tasks that they additionally have, such as lighting in the virtual space, matching the lighting, color matching, and how the LED wall interacts with their camera sensor. Which also led to a higher workload. But on the contrary, some participants, interestingly enough, also mentioned that they did not experience any change in responsibilities, and that they mainly thought that the VP supervisor had more responsibilities.
Don't hire those guys.
So for first-time use, I gave every participant a scenario, which was a DOP has only worked with traditional filmmaking approaches before, and they're gonna work on their first ICVFX projects. Do you think that requires some homework beforehand? And if so, what should they do to prepare? It was mentioned that they should familiarize themselves with the technology and the possibilities of ICVFX before the start of the projects. However, some also said that the VP or the VFX supervisor will guide them through it, whether that's by answering any questions or taking care of some of the things like matching the foreground and background. So for the limitations and benefits, to start with mentioned limitations, moire effect and light spill. So here we have an example of moire effect. And light spill is mainly mentioned in the context of your physical lights shining onto the LED wall, which can make the image look washed out or grayish. And ICVFX can be expensive and miscommunication happens. However, there were also a ton of benefits mentioned, such as it creates versatility, flexibility, and creativity. You can get an actor anywhere. They don't have to necessarily travel anymore. You can just get them down in a VP studio and they can be in outer space. And if done well, the process becomes faster, more sustainable, and cost efficient. Now for lighting, a lot of DOPs mentioned that they use the wall and ceiling as a key light, and they think it is a beautiful source of lighting. The background and the foreground lighting obviously need to be matched, but that does save time in post-production. And no longer limited time to shoot special lighting moments. So if we, for example, take a sunset, if you would shoot that out on location, you obviously only have that time until the sun has set. But with ICVFX, you can have a sunset for hours if you'd like. Now for the appropriateness of ICVFX. Several participants mentioned that nowadays wild and creative briefs get created for virtual production all the time, but 9 out of 10 times it's not actually suited for virtual production. Which leads me to my next point, that it's not suited for every type of project. So what came out is that if you, for example, want to shoot 30% of your feature film with ICVFX, that can work wonderfully. But for smaller advertisement, it might not be as suitable. And it was mentioned that ICVFX should be seen as a production tool to get things done that are otherwise difficult or too expensive. And then lastly, for language, it was noticed that different language and terms are used based on the technology that is being used. and because you work with people from different departments. So you don't only work with people from a production background anymore, but also with people with a VFX background or a games background who might be used to different language. So a solution to that was mentioned, which was that DOPs or someone else should function as an interpreter to avoid miscommunication on set. And with that, I want to thank you very much for listening. And like Victoria also mentioned before, if you have any questions, want to have a chat, or know of any job opportunities, you can find me somewhere here today or tomorrow, or send me an email or connect on LinkedIn. Thank you again.